Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another installment of our Android tip calculator tutorial. Now let's look at what we have currently. Our add data button works, which is fine, but you'll notice that whenever we add a new customer down here, if we change the name of the customer to something else, the name does not change down here, and that's a problem. We need to change it so that every time the user changes the name of the customer, it will change down here as well as up here. So let's fix that here. Now, how do we detect whether or not the user has changed the name? Well, the easiest way is probably not to check every time they type something, because every time they put a new character into the edit text, checking each time that he does that, it's probably going to be too much of a waste of CPU power. So instead of doing that, we can check every time the user clicks out of an edit text. And by that I mean, so he selects this edit text and he wants to change the name. He types in the name, and then once he's done typing, he'll probably click next, or he'll just click out of it into another edit text, or he'll click the back button. Well, never mind, that doesn't work, but he'll click next, or he'll select another edit text. And when he does that, we can be sure that he's done editing the original edit text, this test name right here. He's done editing this when he clicks next, or he clicks out of that. And what that means is this edit text that he just edited, it has just lost focus. And focus refers to what is currently active in this app. So again, he edits the name and replaces it with something that he wants to change it to, like Fred. And then once he's done with that, he gives focus to another element of our app, and this one no longer has focus. So why don't we update the name down here whenever the name up here loses focus. Now, how do we detect when something loses focus? Well, the easiest way is not to write our own code, but to inherit the code from something else. And the way we do that is just like onFocusChangeListener, we implement another interface. So let's implement onFocusChangeListener. And onFocusChangeListener is something that can detect when a view has a change in its state of focus, whether it gains focus or it loses focus. So let's import that code, and so it gets imported up here. And let's hover over main activity and click Add Unimplemented Methods, and that will give us the method that we have to implement when we implement the onFocusChange interface. And that method is called onFocusChange. Now, onFocusChange runs whenever something that main activity is listening to loses or gains focus. So just like onClick, which we used here, we actually have to tell main activity, which again implements onFocusChangeListener, to listen to certain views before this code will actually do anything. So let's set that up. So for the button, we use the method setOnClickListener. For the onFocusChangeListener, we have to use this method, setOnFocusChangeListener. Very intuitive. And we set it, we make main activity listen to first customer, which again is the edit text that is generated by default. And we also have to set onFocusChangeListener to every single future edit text that we create by clicking the Add Data button after the first one. So we go into our onClick code block, and at the end of it, or right here, when we create ET1, which is the name of every new customer, we can do ET1.set onFocusChangeListener to this. Now we're listening to both the first customer, which was created automatically, as well as every subsequent customer that is created. We're listening to changes in focus in its name edit text. So what do we actually want to have happen when we change, or when the person loses focus on an edit text. We want the name to change, and we want, when they edit the edit text, we want the corresponding text view. So when they edit this, we want the corresponding text view all the way down here to also change. And thankfully we have an easy way of doing that, because we have an organizational unit called the diner object that relates this edit text up here to the correct corresponding text view down here. That's what our diner object does for us. So let's go back to our diner class, and let's go ahead and create a new method for it. We have a constructor method up here already, which we created. Let's create another method. It'll be a public method. It'll return nothing, so type void, and the method is called setName, and it will take no arguments. And what the setName function or method will do is it'll set the TV name text view. It'll set that text equal to etName dot get text dot toString. Oh, whoops. Okay, there we go. So what do we just do? We create a function, and this function takes the TV name, which is the text view down here for that particular customer, and it sets the text of that text view to etName.getText, so it gets the text from the correct edit text up here, and then it turns that into a string with .toString here, and then it sets the text equal to whatever the string version of the text from etName is. Okay, so this function right here, when we run it, it will set this text view for this customer equal to whatever is typed up here. How much time do I have left? Okay, hasn't been too long, so I'll continue. Okay. Oh, and you'll notice that we used toString here, whereas here we didn't. Okay, the simple reason is because when you use get text on, you know what, never mind, just basically add toString to the onFocus method here. Add toString to et1.getText and add toString to et2.getText. It's a silly. Okay, the thing is, when you get text from an edit text, what it gives back is not really a string. It's something called an editable, which we won't worry about. But basically, we need to turn that into a string before we can give it to set text. You'll notice that actually did work before when we didn't put toString here, but it's just a good idea to use toString. So that's why we use toString here as well as here. I forgot about it earlier, but it's something that you should do, because set text, you're supposed to give it a string, not an editable. Anyway, toString turns whatever this is into a string, and then we give that to set text. So that's what this does. Now let's go back to our onFocusChange method here. This has two arguments, as you can see. It has a view, and we're going to call this argument 0, and it has a boolean, which we're going to call, or let's just use the names that it's given us. It has a view called v, just like onClick does, and it has a boolean, a second argument, which is called hasFocus. Okay, what does that mean? Well, the view is automatically passed by Android, and it refers to whatever just had its focus status changed, whether something has gained focus or lost focus. That view is passed. And the boolean hasFocus refers to whether or not it has gained or lost focus. If it just gained focus, this boolean will be true, and if it lost focus, this boolean hasFocus will be false. And a boolean, by the way, is a data type that resolves to or evaluates to either true or false. So it only has two values, true or false. Again, if it has focus or it just got focus, then this is true. If it just lost focus, it's false. Okay, so let's write code here. Let me just write it out and then I'll talk about it. 1 second, almost done. Okay, I just wrote some code here, and now we're going to go over it. So this first line of our onFocusChange method is new, and it starts with the code word or the keyword for, and that means whatever is inside these fancy brackets here is part of a for loop. And a loop is a block of code that runs over and over and over again until we tell it to stop. So in this case, this is the code of the for loop, so it'll run this line, and then this line, and then this line, and then once it reaches the end of the code, or the end of the block, it'll go back to the start and it'll run it again, and it'll keep doing this until it gets to a point where we tell it to stop. So let's analyze what is inside the for loop, or what makes up the statement for this for loop. The first part is, and there are 3 parts that are separated by semicolons. The first part is int I equals 0. And that means we're creating a variable called I, and it holds an integer, int. An integer is just a number, a whole number that can be positive or negative. It's a very basic data type and a very basic object. So it's just a number, and it's called I, and we set it equal to 0. Then the variable name I here doesn't matter. It's just a programming trope to use the letter I, and it stands for index if you're wondering. So int I equals 0, that's the first part. And the second part is I is less than dynalist.size. Now we already know what dynalist.size is. It's how big or how many elements are inside the dyno list. And this whole part refers to when or what condition has to be true for you to run the loop. So as long as I, which starts off as 0, is less than the size of dyno list, keep running this loop here. When I is no longer less than the size of dyno list, the loop is over, you break out or you exit out of the loop and you go to the next line. And then the last part here is I++. I++ just basically means increase I by 1. So it starts off as 0, and then here it says increase I by 1. And this piece of code here runs at the end of each iteration or at the end of each loop. When we're talking about loops, an iteration is basically one run of a loop. So it'll run once, and that's one iteration, and it'll start over and run again, and that'll be a second iteration. But yeah, so those are the 3 parts of a for loop. So, and this last part here is automatically run at the end of each iteration. So I starts at 0. So it runs so it goes here, it checks, is I less than the size of dyno list? And of course it will be because I is 0. And then it'll run the code here. And then it'll go back and check again. Or it runs the code, and then at the end of the code it'll say, increase I by 1. So now I is equal to 1. And now it'll go back up here and it'll go, okay, I is 1 now, is I less than dyno list? If it is not less than dyno list, then let's run the code again. Or sorry, if it is less than dyno list, let's run the code again. It'll run it again, get to the end, and increase I by 1 once more. And then I will be 2, and then we'll go, is I less than dyno list? If it is still less than dyno list.size, then run the code again and increase I. On the other hand, if it is no longer less than dyno list, if it is equal to or greater than dyno list.size, then we're out of the loop. We don't run the loop or the code inside the for loop, and we go down and go to the last line after, or the next line after the for loop, which is nothing. So basically we're done with the method. Okay, so hope that's a for loop. Hopefully it makes sense. If it doesn't, don't worry. I'm going to go over it one more time before, probably not this video, probably the next video. But let's continue for a little bit. So that's a for loop. It runs over and over again until I is bigger than dyno list.size. Now what does it run? It runs, the first part of the for loop is an if conditional. If v, which is the view here, if v is equal to dynolist.getI, What does that mean? Well, get, when you use get on an array list like DynaList, it returns the I element of DynaList. So let me open up Paint. So say you have an array list like this. And you use get 1 on it. That will return the second element of that array list. Instead, if you use get 2 or get 0, it will get you the first element for get 0 and the third element for get 2. So you'll notice that 0 corresponds to the first element in an array list. So get returns whatever element that is at position I in this array list. So if v is, and then after that we have .etName. When this is not a method, and you know that because there's no brackets here. etName is simply an attribute of a Dynar object, and we know that because we named it etName right here. So this here, DynaList.getI.etName refers to the etName of whatever DynaList.getI is equal to. So if I happens to be equal to 1, then what it returns is the etName of Dynar2. And if I is equal to 1 or 0, then it returns the etName of Dynar1. If I is equal to 2, it returns the etName of Dynar3. And what we check is v, the thing that just lost or gained focus, equal to the etName of DynaList.getI? And hopefully that makes sense. And then after this part of the conditional, we have 2 ampersands. When you have 2 ampersands together, that basically translates to the word and in English. Right there. Okay. So you use 2 ampersands when you want 2 conditions to be true in an if statement. So in the first part we have is v equal to the etName of DynaList.getI. Now we need that to be true, but we also need this second part of the statement to be true. And the second part says has focus equal to false. Again, has focus is equal to true when something just got focus, and it's equal to false when something just lost focus. And we want this code to only run when the edit text has lost focus, because that means the user's done editing it. So this whole thing, for the whole thing to be true, because of this and symbol here, this double ampersand, this first part has to be true and this second part has to be true. Only when both are true will this code run in the middle here. So again, we check if v is equal to the correct etName for the correct Dynar, and if it is, we also check if it just lost focus as opposed to just gained focus. And if both those conditions are true, run this code here. And what is this code here? Well, this code says to, first of all, return the DynaList at I again, and then we use the setName function, or sorry, method. And we just wrote the setName method here, which basically makes sure we get the text from etName, makes it a string, and we set the text of tvName to that string. So this code right here will make sure that the correct Dynar in DynaList will make its text view name equal to its edit text name. And you know what? I'm going to cut this here and sort of explain it a little better in the next video, which is coming right up. So give me 1 second. See you guys in a bit.